Hopkins. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Hello, my guest today is Dr. Robin Buckley. I'm very excited about Dr. Robin. We've had such wonderful chit chat behind the scenes. Now, let me tell you about Dr. Robin Buckley. She is a TED speaker, not TEDx speaker, but a TED speaker and an expert in cognitive behavior methodology. She has earned her PhD in clinical psychology from Hofstra University. Her work as an expert in cognitive behavioral methodology has been featured on multiple media platforms, including Entrepreneur, Chef, Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, Nike, other podcasts, news radio, and of course, on the TED stage. As a speaker, Robin focuses on the application of cognitive behavioral strategies to mental wellness in the workplace and women's equality, as well as empowerment. And as a coach, Robin applies cognitive behavioral tactics to help organizations, teams, and leaders create strategic plans for professional and personal success. Our conversation today will be focused on individual self-care strategies for the employees. Dr. Robin Buckley, welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast.
Hello, Coach Lee. It's so good to be here.
I'm very, very excited about our conversation. So I'm very happy to have you here today. I know we're going to jump into it, and I've spent so much talking on your resume. I've always spent a few minutes on your resume because it's so impressive. But can you tell us a little bit about you and how you got into what it is that you do here?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So my origin story is I've always been in love with psychology. I took it as a class in undergrad when I was still a journalism major, and that was it for me. The challenge with psychology as I progressed into grad school was that a lot of mental health is based, and mental health industry is based on a disease model. What's wrong? What's the crisis? What's the problem? And that doesn't align with me as a person. That I am more proactive and more in that preventative model. And I found coaching right around the time I was finishing my doctorate back in 2001, long before coaching was an industry. And coaching comes at a person, as you well know, from just that perspective: positive psychology, proactive, preventative, and strength-based, which is the best part about it. So while I love psychology, the specialization in cognitive behavioral methodology allowed me to dovetail that with the approach of coaching. And that was a really perfect fit for me individually as well as professionally. And so I've been doing that since then. I transitioned out of traditional mental health, and then really focused on coaching probably for about the past 18 years.
Wow, for the past 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is remarkable. And you know what I really like about your story is that you focus on making sure that we are looking at the more positive aspect and not looking at what's wrong with you. I think that there is a little too much of what's wrong, what's the problem, rather than what's right and what we are doing well and how we are succeeding
Right.
and the good healthy feelings that we would have.
Right.
So I love that because I know a bit about cognitive behavioral therapy because I had gone through it. And
Oh.
so I understand that a bit of a process. And I wonder, how do you apply this to the organizations or to the
Mhm.
individuals that you work with?
Yeah, a lot of it starts with helping them understand the neuroscience. And of course, people's eyes glaze over when I first bring that up. And I'm like, no, 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 it'll be fun. I'm a brain geek, but I'll make it fun. So I help people understand how their brain is connected to their feelings and their behaviors. And most humans don't make that connection. They don't realize that everything we feel, everything we do comes from a thought. And when we can identify the thought, we can change how we feel and how we behave. And that's magic. And that's what I try and teach my clients, whether in groups or whether one on one. So the lesson starts with helping them understand the difference between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So, not to bore your audience too much, but our amygdala is what gets us to either freeze, flight, or oh my God, flight, freeze, or why am I losing it, Lee? Oh my God, you get the gist. So we are in these fear based reactions. And when we feel that, our amygdala is firing hard. It's raising our cortisol, it's raising our adrenaline, and it's getting us to experience emotions and behaviors that are not effective for our optimal functioning. What we want is to shift to our prefrontal cortex, right located right behind our forehead, because our prefrontal cortex is all about strategy and objectivity and reality based and data. And that's where we can control everything we're feeling and everything we're doing. So, in those moments, it's learning how to shift from our amygdala to our prefrontal cortex. Because here's the craziest part, those two areas of our brain don't function simultaneously. So, if you're in a moment where you are being impacted by anxiety or fear or self doubt or imposter syndrome, your amygdala is firing and engaged, but your prefrontal cortex isn't. And that's the reality, objective part of our brain. And so I teach clients not only about how their brain works, but then specific strategies to make sure the prefrontal cortex gets engaged. Because if that's being engaged, it silences the amygdala, and we then can function in a way that is really effective and really creates peak performance.
I like that. So you really help people understand that there's a light switch essentially that turns off the thinking and the reactive. I
Yeah,
am
exactly.
focused, I know what I'm doing, I'm aware, and that I'm reacting and I'm being a bit of Tasmanian devil when I'm just in my feelings.
Right. That's exactly it. That in those moments, we feel the things, and we don't stop to say, okay, what's the thought creating that? And what can I apply to get my prefrontal cortex working so I can be basing this on data and information rather than fears and unknowns.
Yes, and that's where we want to operate too, because when we're acting in those fears and unknowns, we create more problems for ourselves because we're not really focused on how to resolve the solution in a way that might
Right.
help us in the long term, but just, oh my God, get it away. And
Right.
that causes a lot of pain for us. Now, can you tell me a bit about how you can apply this to the individual working in the workplace? Like, how do you help them after you get a bit of education? Here's the light switch. Now that I know it's here, how do you help others focus and I guess handle it?
Yeah. So it starts with understanding what they're dealing with. And a lot of times my clients will come in because they're dealing with some really common phenomenon: burnout, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, or just not having a work life harmony. And let's put a line, underscore, italics on harmony, because you and I both know, Coach Lee, that work life balance is a misnomer and doesn't exist. But work life harmony can exist. So once I understand what they're coming in for, because typically that's one of the issues, if not several of them. And from there, it's working to help them start to learn, practice, and adopt the strategies that's going to get that prefrontal cortex working. So they're no longer trapped by either a fight, flight, or freeze mentality that the amygdala creates. When people are unhappy in the workforce, again, as you well know, their reactions tend to put them in one of those three boxes. Either they're always frustrated and irritated and angry, which is the fight. The flight is sometimes that they're avoiding work. They avoid going in, they avoid signing on to meetings, they're looking for another job. And for some of the younger generations, they just don't show up. They're just out because they're so overwhelmed. And then certainly when we're in that situation, if you don't have strategies to get your brain not to be in that flight, fight, or freeze mentality, then you're stuck. And human beings do not like being stuck. When we feel trapped or that we have no options, that really shuts down our functioning. So I work with clients to learn very specific strategies. And not all strategies are going to work for everyone, but I make sure that they learn enough strategies that they can pick and choose what works for them and build their own toolbox. Because again, through coaching, I want to make myself irrelevant. I want my clients to have the tools they need so that they can help themselves. And then certainly if they need a booster session, we can do that. But I don't want to have to be in their lives all the time for them to function at their best. So it's right from the very first session, we start talking about strategies so that they can walk out and start practicing, not only in the workplace, but at home. Because these strategies aren't just about the workplace, they're about the whole person and using these strategies. So again, their amygdala isn't firing all the time and their only
Mhm.
options aren't fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes, better tools, better tools. So that is one of the things that really have changed my life is that I was stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was fighting my coworkers. That's why we have this podcast, fighting everybody. I was afraid to be rejected and judged and all kinds of stuff. I didn't have the right tools. And so giving the tools and giving me the autonomy and the power, I felt very empowered to use them when I thought that they were applicable to my situations.
Right.
And it turns out that I do social connections coaching for both personal and professional because, as you said, that there is a work life harmony that needs to be created. So, what happens on my outside of work, I carry that right into work. And I know that you know so much about this because you, in fact, you even have a book that's coming out that equates to that or that addresses that issue, Marriage LLC. Marriage LLC. Now, my listeners are probably going to be like, what are you talking about? Marriage is all about love. But if you were listening, she had said that emotion, everything we do is based in emotion. So can you tell us about what is Marriage LLC,
Yeah.
by the way?
Yeah.
And yeah, just a little more about that.
Sure. So Marriage LLC is my proprietary coaching model for couples. And it came about from all the work that I did with executives and senior level leaders. When I would talk with my individual clients, very often they were females, and we would talk about their work life and their work professional goals that they had coming into executive coaching. But over time, they'd also bring up issues at home because, again, as you noted, they're interrelated. We cannot separate our work life from our home life because we're one person. So you're right. Sometimes we carry things in from each environment into the other space. And as I would talk with these powerful people, I would ask them very often when they brought up their relationships, well, tell me about work. And I'd shift the conversation away from their personal life and they'd be confused for a minute and like, tell me, do you ever get into a conflict with people at work? And of course, as leaders, you're going to have conflict sometimes. So they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, well, tell me how you resolve that. And they can talk about how they deal with situations at work almost as a running list, the strategy they use, how they handle certain situations. And I would just simply ask them at that point, why don't you apply them to your relationship at home? Oh, no, it's different, Dr. Robin. It's different. That, again, like you said, that's emotional and that's my personal life. That's not work. But the way we interact just in general is absolutely something that can be generalized into either parts of our life. So Marriage LLC is this model where I took the idea of using a business framework and I apply it to a couple's relationship, whether it's marriage or another committed relationship or even dating. And we applied business concepts, business strategies to create a strong relationship. And then people don't have to necessarily change when they walk through the door of their home or the door of work. They can still use the strategies that they use really well at work to have a really successful relationship, and sometimes vice versa. So the strategies in the book, people will say, well, I didn't go to business school. I'm like, neither did I. I work with a lot of business people, but these are simplistic strategies like delineation of roles. And when we talk about that, it's what's your title? So I use the example a lot that in my committed relationship, my marriage, my husband's the CFO of our house. He has oversight over all our finances. He keeps track of all the details of our finances. That doesn't mean he gets the only say, because no CFO has the only say over finances. They go back to the board and they tell them give them the overview, and then the board gets to make some decisions. Well, in that case, I'm the board. I get to participate in a conversation with my CFO, my husband, to make decisions about our finances. But I don't have to manage that daily because I'm the COO of our home. So I manage our culture and our interactions with other people. I make sure our children are always integrated into things we do, even the ones that don't live with us. So I'm the one that makes sure our daily functioning works really well, where our appointments are and all that. But when we have designated titles, then we're not stepping over each other. When we were first married, I was single for a while, and I was used to doing bills and managing finances. And when we got married, the two of us trying to do it simultaneously made a mess.
Absolutely.
So that's where we said, okay, who's going to do what? Like, who's going to be leading it? Not in charge, not the final say, but leading it. And that's just one example of what this model at Marriage LLC helps couples do. We walk through a business plan for their relationship.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, and so there's so many sayings for those kind of phenomenons, but it boils down to managing expectations and roles and communication in the home, because for some reason we believe it's different. We're expected to do that at work to maintain relationships with people, but not at home with the people that we fall in love with and that we care so deeply about. Let's fix that.
I joke with my clients all the time. I'm like, Disney is in your head. The Hallmark Channel is in your head. Those are lovely, but life is not happily ever after. Life is, we're going to make this work. And I will never say that a relationship is hard work. That's baloney. Like you say it's hard work, it's going to be hard work, but it is diligence. And having a business framework provides some of that structure so that you are diligently, whether it's daily, monthly, or quarterly, doing things to strengthen your relationship.
Yes, daily, monthly, or quarterly. I love that because you want to think about that way, and time blocks, and not just kick the can down the road, but be intentional about it.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Robin Buckley, I mean, this conversation, we could go on. I know we can. But we're going to wrap it up right here. And I'd love to tell the audience, I'd love it if you could tell the audience where they could find you, and tell us the title of that TED Talk that you mentioned. I'm not going to say it, but you are. Like it's something embarrassing, but no, it's
so
fantastic.
Your audience can find me on LinkedIn, just under my name, and they can also find me on Instagram. My clients love both places because it kind of, as they say, it's like my voice in their head on a regular basis. They can also find me at my website, igsouth.com. It stands for insightsgroupsouth.com. And my TED Talk, which I am very proud about, has a very wonderful clickbait title. And the title is Why I Gave My Teenage Daughter a Vibrator. And as many people who have seen it have said, it's about much more than the vibrator. It's really about how to empower girls and women to have a voice over their bodies, and then hopefully it ripples out to have a voice in all areas of their life.
Absolutely. It's all about empowerment, communication, and sharing those things that are important to us and giving us the skills to have a better life. So, Dr. Robin Buckley, I hope that we're able to have you again. Go follow her on the social medias. I'm definitely going to put the links to everything that she mentioned in the chat, or sorry, I'm so used to saying in the chat, but in the show notes. You're going to find those in the show notes. Thank you once again for joining me today, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Lee.
There you have it, another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests, and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. Or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.